Free Japan Channel number 194. Today, May 6th, Wednesday. The time is 2 p.m. Good afternoon, everybody. It is cloudy in Yokohama. Here in Japan, this is a time of so-called Golden Week. Holidays are consecutive annually in this season. And today, May 6th, is the last day of this Golden Week. Therefore, many Japanese would feel some loneliness at the end of this week. But this has nothing to do with the listeners overseas. How are you doing? In May, it is very warm, comfortable, and shining season in Japan. Green is spreading everywhere in the town and city. Today's FGC topic is European leaders angered Trump. This is the topic of today. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz delivered a speech in front of teenagers in Germany, saying that Iranian war is a very irrational war, and US has no legitimacy to wage this war. On the other hand, Merz said, Iranian leaders are very skillful at conducting the war because US Vice President J.D. Vance had no choice but to return to the United States with empty hand because the negotiation in Islamabad was in vain. According to Merz, Iran has still so many retaliation weapons. Therefore, it is on the side of Iran which has the possibility of controlling this war, not United States nor Israel. Not only this remark in front of teenagers, so in the educational institution in Germany, but also in other places, Chancellor Merz of Germany reiterated that he is against this Iran war, which angered President Trump so strongly, of course. Trump decided to withdraw US troops, 5,000 people, 5,000 soldiers from Germany. This figure is very big compared to other soldiers, US soldiers in other countries, Italy, Spain, and so on in England. Of course, in Germany, there were 35,000 soldiers from US were employed. Therefore, this time 5,000 were withdrawn, but still 30,000 US soldiers are there in Germany. But 5,000 people is very big figure. Trump added that Italy and Spain are also on the list, which means US will withdraw its troops from these two countries because Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni was also against Iran war, saying that this is not our war. And the Italian authority refused US bombers to land on Sicily Island, although these bombers could land on Sicily Island regularly until now. Italian government refused the landing of US bombers in Sicily Island, of course, bases. And the Spanish government even refused US airplanes to fly over its territory. These remarks of European leaders clearly demonstrate that they are against Iran war. Of course, in FCC, this channel, I also repeated that Iran war is a very irrational war. US and Israel have no legitimacy to continue this war. Especially the United States is so far away from Iran, and Iran poses no imminent military threat to the United States for the time being. Nevertheless, President Trump decided to wage this war this time. It was only for the sake of Israel. Israel had direct menace from Iran, and Israel probably secretly ordered the US government or President Trump to attack Iran. This is a war this time. European leaders clearly discerned this structure of Iran war, refusing to participate in such a stupid war. Therefore, I'm also of the opinion that European leaders are right in deciding to separate from this war. However, they are also totally dependent on the US force in their own territory. No European country can stand on their feet without the help of US Army or US Navy. From Germany, for example, the United States government are now considering to withdraw its ballistic missile or Tomahawk missile. Then Germany is a very weak side against Russian threat. Russia is the main target for German defense. If the US government decides to withdraw its missiles from German territory, then German people have to defend their country on their own. Can they really do so? Perhaps no. Perhaps no. The same thing is true of Italy. In the Mediterranean, Russian submarines are rampant. Russian submarines are everywhere in the Mediterranean, secretly, of course. Therefore, Italy is also always on the threat of Russian submarine. If the submarine carries some kind of nuclear weapon, what if Russia has some bad intention against Italy? This is the main guideline for Italian defense intelligence. Therefore, not only Germany but also Italy have to depend on US force in their own soil, on their own soil. Not only these two countries, but also other European countries, virtually every country in Europe has to depend on the United States. Then Trump now said that in Ukraine war, you were, so Europeans are trouble. Therefore, the United States helped you at that time. But now, when the US is in need of your help, so European help, you were not there. This is the logic of Trump. And this is the principle of military strategy or military operation, isn't it? Isn't it? Therefore, this is not the topic of righteousness or legitimacy, but it is purely the topic of self-defense, the possibility of self-defense. No European country can defend themselves by themselves. No, they can't. It is also true of Japanese defense strategy. Japan also has some kind of military system, self-defense force. But this self-defense force is absolutely dependent on the United States force, Navy, Army. And there are several US bases in Japanese territory. Here in Kanagawa, where I live now, there are so many US bases in Yokosuka Naval Port and Atsugi, Sagamihara, and Zama Army bases. Especially in Okinawa, US bases are concentrated. More than 70% of the US bases in Japan are now concentrated in Okinawa. There are so many Japanese people who say that US force should go away. However, this situation means Japan is dependent on the United States in the military perspective or in the military standpoint. If the United States withdraw these troops and these soldiers from Japan and Seventh Fleet from Yokosuka, then another threat from China. So China is the most imminent threat for Japan, will come to our soil immediately. US President Trump was angered by European leaders. European leaders have logically righteousness, but can they really say so? Or here is Japan, therefore Prime Minister Takaichi, should she also imitate these European leaders, saying that US is now waging stupid war and we never participate in such a silly war? Can she also say so? This is a very big question for Japanese.